hide. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation. Yes, I have to go teach after this, so we'll try to make it succinct. I'm going to talk about a recent manuscript that was led by Eric Claros, who's here with us, and we're going to be co-presenting this talk. So the talk is called Moisture Sources of Precipitation Using Convection Permitting Simulations, a study over South America, and it was published this year in Geophysical Research Letters. So I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but there are many numerical models to estimate precipitation sources and sinks, and they range from kind of super simple analytical models to offline models and online models, which are in which you kind of numerically tag the moisture through either a regional or a global climate model. And in this talk, I'm going to take one very simple model, the two-layer DRM, and one that is quite complex. It's the WRF with water vapor tracers developed by Insua Costa and Miguel Macho. I'm going to take these two kind of as extremes of complexity. One second. Okay. So that on the one hand. On the other hand, we know that there's this kind of, for the past decade or so, we've seen the emergence of convection permitting models. And these convection permitting models are higher resolution and explicitly resolve convection, which is a key process driving precipitation, not only in the tropics, but also in the mid-latitudes. And the idea here is that if you have kind of traditional low resolution models above, let's say, above 4 kilometers, they have to parameterize convection, and this can introduce biases. And when you can explicitly resolve convection, a lot of studies have shown that there's a better representation of local precipitation processes, and this improves our estimation of precipitation. So the overarching goal in this work is to estimate the sources and sinks of precipitation using convection permitting simulations over South America. And we're going to be using a simple model, but before we do this, we need to answer two important questions. The first one is, are precipitation recycling estimates different if we use a convection permitting model than if we use a coarser model? And the second question is, can we actually get realistic estimates of recycling using a simple recycling model when we compare it to a higher complexity model? And so those are the two kind of driving questions before we go on to actually calculating recycling over the continent. So to answer the first question, we are going to use the complex model, so WRF with water vapor tracers. And we're going to only focus on the Amazon and the Amazon basin. We're going to use one 24-kilometer simulation and one 4-kilometer simulation. And because these are really expensive, we only do 1 year of simulation. And again, what we want to know is there a difference if we do the estimates using CPM versus non-CPM? So these are the results. So in convection, so the first one here is the 24 kilometers, so non-convection permitting. The middle one is the convection permitting simulation, and this is the difference, so CPM minus non-CPM. And so what we see very clearly is that here, so this is the Amazon basin, this is the Andes Mountains, and this is the eastern flank of the Andes Mountains. So the CPM shows higher recycling. Oh, sorry. And what we're mapping here is precipitation recycling. So the fraction of precipitation within each of the pixels that comes from evapotranspiration from within the Amazon basin. So what we see is that there's much higher recycling over the eastern flank of the Andes and in the northern part of the Amazon basin here with the border of along Colombia and Venezuela. And so much higher estimates of recycling here and a bit lower within the basin itself. So clearly, there are spatial differences. Um, Furthermore, if we look at the time series, so this is the daily time series and this is the monthly time series, we do see higher variability in the CPM compared to the non-CPM simulations at the daily time scale. So these are the peaks and troughs here. And then you also see this in the monthly time series where you have higher recycling based on the CPM during would be kind of the dry season, and then lower recycling during the wet season. So there's higher variability in the CPM simulations. So to answer this first question, we do find that there are differences when we use a CPM to calculate the recycling versus non-CPM. So that is true. And we will take this CPM simulations using WRF with water vapor tracers as the truth. And then, oh, sorry, we're going to compare this kind of truth to the simple model. So the two-layer DRM is our simple model, and we're driving it with kind of traditional WRF output to drive the two-layer DRM, and we're comparing it to the complex estimations using WRF with water vapor tracers. And the question is, can this simple model give realistic estimates of recycling when compared to the higher complexity model? And we're seeing kind of the same thing, but now the first map is the two-layer DRM. The second map is the WRF with water vapor tracers, and we're looking at the recycling ratio. The area average recycling ratio is 25%, so roughly the same with both of these simulations. And when we look at the difference between the two-layer DRM and the WRF with water vapor tracers, we see that the two-layer DRM has a little bit of an overestimation in the western part of the basin, like the western half, and a bit of a underestimation in the east. But spatially, they're very, very similar with this kind of very well-known pattern of increasing recycling ratio as we move from the Atlantic Ocean into the basin and kind of are blocked by the Andes Mountains. In terms of variability, we see very similar variability at the diurnal scale and the monthly. However, we do see underestimation at the beginning of the period with the two-layer DRM. So what we can conclude here is that it's doing pretty well, that the two-layer DRM is comparable to the complex WRF with water vapor tracers. So now we have this tool that we can use to estimate recycling with the huge advantage that it's at a fraction of the computational cost. So the two-layer DRM is 0.077%. The computational cost is 0.077% that of WRF water vapor tracers. Okay, so with this, I'll hand it over to Eric.
Thank you, Francina. Yes, as Francina mentioned, well, let me explain first this part because, as Francina mentioned in the last slides, convection permitting models are becoming more popular for studying climate. So, in particular, Francina and the South American Affinity Group developed a high-resolution climatological simulation for South America, a 22-year simulation at 4-kilometer resolution. They did that for the historical period between 2000 and 2021, and also for a future period using pseudo-global warming. So this is important because these are the climate simulations, the convection permitting model simulations that we are going to use to drive the 12 DRM and to study the moisture sources of precipitation across South America. So next slide, please. Um, So we are going to use the 12 DRM to calculate the sources and sinks of precipitation in this simulation I explained in the last slide. As Francina said, the 12 DRM is a very useful tool because the computational cost is less than 0.1% of the computational cost of work with water vapor tracers. Um, and it also allows to track multiple regions in one simulation, unlike the work with water vapor tracers. Uh, sorry, next. No, in the yeah, there. Thank you. So here in the middle, I present a map of the sink and source regions. For this source region, we are considering all these 19 regions. We have 15 continental regions and 4 oceanic regions as source regions. For the sink or target regions, we are considering the 15 continental regions. These regions um, are defined based on the main hydrological basins of South America, and similar regions have been also used in past studies of moisture sources in South America. So the next, please. So based in these source regions, we can see here what is the moisture contribution of each one of them to the precipitation in South America. Something interesting we can observe from here, for example, is that in the case of the 4 oceanic regions, from region 16 to region 19, there are some regions that contribute considerably more to precipitation, that are region 17, that is the South Pacific Ocean, and region 18, the North Atlantic Ocean, while the region 16 and region 19, which are the North Pacific Ocean and South Atlantic Ocean, contribute very little to precipitation in South America. In addition, you can see also how the Amazon basin, the region 1, contributes to precipitation to several regions in South America. So to quantify this, next slide, please. In this table, I present the moisture contributions of each of these source regions that are the rows in the table to the sink regions that are the columns in the table. Um, so, for example, we can observe that the Amazon basin, that is the source region number 1, contributes to almost one-fourth of the precipitation occurring in the same region, which is the precipitation recycling ratio over the Amazon basin. But we can also see other very interesting values. For example, in the case of the region 8, that is the region around the Titicaca Basin, the Altiplano region, we can see that the moisture contribution to precipitation is 0.18, which means that, almost 18% of the precipitation in this region comes from the evaporation from the same region, which is very high considering that this region 8 is considerably smaller than other regions. Um, Another interesting finding, for example, is that in the case of region 9, that is the Central Pacific basin, we can see that almost one-third of the precipitation comes from the evaporation from the Amazon basin, the region 1. So yeah, this table, the purpose of this table is basically try to give an overview of how these relationships what these relationships are between these different source and sink regions across all South America. For sure, more specific studies can be developed based on this in the data we have shared in the manuscript. Next slide, please. In addition, for future work, what we are doing now is we are developing is, some data sets of land cover change. As you can see, for example, here the 2015 is the present or the historical land cover, and we have in the other plot the 2017 map, which is the the projected land coverage changes in South America. So we are trying to study, based on these land coverage changes, how climate and how the moisture sources of precipitation can change in the future. Next slide. So to conclude, precipitation recycling estimate differ at 4 kilometer resolution at convection permitting models compared to 24 kilometer resolution, which are non-convection permitting models. And second, the 2LDRM provides similar recycling estimates to work with water vapor tracers at 4 kilometers. This gives us a useful and computationally efficient tool to calculate recycling using convection permitting simulations. And third, source sinks relationship had been estimated using the SAG convection permitting simulation data. So, thank you for your attention.